welcome to Make a Path Presents. I'm Ronnie Hayes, and this is part 3 of the Doomsday Kingdom issue number 1 audio commentary with artist James Milne. Now we're going to dive straight into this. If you didn't watch part 1, that was the writer-creator commentary with me, and then part 2 was the beginning of the art commentary with me and James Milne. So let's dive straight into part 3. Alright, so when you open the issue to page 1, we got the rider closing his eyes. He opens his eyes, giving us the point of view, and we see the feet of somebody talking to him. We see a doctor healing an arrow through his arm, and then we find out down here the doctor is actually cutting the arrow so they can pull it through, and then we have the ouch moment at the bottom where he rips it out. And that was my fail at the bottom, I think. That green box, it's supposed to be the guy who's been talking this whole time, but I don't think we should have had it in green now that I think about it, because when you read it, it flows over to the next page.
I disagree, because when you get to the second page, it will make more sense because you've now got a box in the brownish colour, which is the rider. And then by the time you get to the end of the issue, when you see the Guardian, he's primarily in like a green camouflage jacket, which was why I said let's go with a green. Also, it's a common colour against red.
Oh, I still love the color boxes. I just am unsure now if the color box should start on page 1 or on page 2 where he's actually doing the voiceover.
I get you, because it's how it is. I mean, if you have to change it later down the line, it's not that much of a problem, but it kind of makes sense to be on that page because he's being interrogated from panel 1 and then it ends with no bubbles.
Yeah.
So you should just instantly assume that it's still the Guardian talking in that box, because it's not the Doctor, because he's got a speech bubble on his own saying the pain will fade. And then obviously you got the next page, which will show, and it's now got, if I remember correctly, it's got the rider like saying something in response, and then you'll get a sense of now most of the issue is going to be told carrying on this conversation, but it's flashed back in time. And then the final panel, which is the face reveal, the face reveal of the rider, that mask was so hard to draw from that angle.
Yeah.
Oh my god. The amount of times, like, I even found the original artwork, which someone's actually bought, thank God. I thought I threw it away because I wasn't happy with how these pages, the first early pages turned out. So in the process of doing the colouring, I actually made the mask look more as it looked in the rest of the issue. And this is the thing that happened quite a bit. It's a character that has a unique look. And when you're first starting a comic project, for those who might run into the same issue, getting all these new characters to look the same every panel is freaking difficult, unless you've had like plenty of time beforehand, like sketching out different things. I am more an artist who likes to just draw everything in the comic, because drawing the comic takes long enough, and you could say it's kind of a bit of a failure having to redraw things in the issue, but it still flows the same. All the ideas in my head at the time when I'm drawing a page don't go away because I've not come back weeks and weeks later trying to get used to drawing the characters. So even page 2 with the rider on the horse, I might get Ronnie to put this in the edit, but the original looks so bad compared to how it looks in the final, because the mask was I was still struggling with how the mask looked, and it made him look like he had like buck teeth or something. It also looked like the rider was falling off the horse, and it also looked like the horse was way too big for the rider to even be on. So like the horse actually stayed the same. I drew that on paper in pen, then I scanned it, and then the rider was pretty much manipulated in Photoshop for the legs and then redrawn over for the torso and the head to make it look how he does in the rest of it. Because I only got used to drawing the rider. I had like an epiphany moment on the page where he's been, I think it's just after he's been shot with the riot bag and he's like clutching his chest. On that page was when I was like, I can draw the rider now, like pretty much as the same as possible. Like even if you're experienced, you can't draw everything exact because you're not like photocopying or you're not using a 3D model, so it's not like it's going to have the same stitching on the armor or on the hands or on the kneecaps. Sometimes it will look like it's got like 5 pieces of stitching, and I'm quite anal about it as well. I do like to have the same amount so it's not changing the look of the suit radically, because even a small change can affect it. But it's just something you have to get used to. Like there's only so much time in the day you can do for one page before having to get another one. So the mask, to summarize it, was the worst thing, because it was just trying to see what it looked like from different angles, because I didn't actually see the mask until you managed to get hold of one like much later. So there was about like 6 pages where I had to go back and just redraw it, because he didn't look like he did by the end of the issue from when he did it at the front. So
what was your thought process, or did you even think about if the horse should be on all fours or jumping up, or what was that?
Looking back at it now, there is something missing, and it could have been a speech bubble with the rider saying "yeah," because I just wanted like an epic shot because it's a full page and it's a change of scenery or whatever. Just having the horse just like stood still doesn't really convey the motion. And I also wanted to like say you were seeing this in a film or whatever. The rider has no fucks for the prisoner, so even though like the prisoner's on quite a long rope, I'd like to see like the prisoner kind of like falling over because the rider just decided to show off on the horse, even though it's just a show off for the viewer. But also compositionally, it looks all right. It's like, who was your prisoner? It shows you that he's talking to the rider because the rider's the very next thing you see underneath that speech box. It goes directly down to the prisoner and his leg flows to the next bubble, which is the response to the rider saying just someone who needed to die. In one of the reviews that someone did, he said this image was very cinematic. He said it was like very Christopher Nolan-ish, so that's why I like this page. But yeah, I just didn't want like a boring, even just with the horse trotting, because it's a comic and you're doing still images. Unless you're doing something like fast-paced with like speed lines and motion blur or whatever, you can't really get a lot of energy and excitement in some pages.
Yeah.
So here, again, because he's got a mask, it's covering pretty much all expression that the rider can do. So like a speech bubble like saying, yeah, would have been really cool, but there's just nowhere to put it that I would like, especially now that we've got the final placement for the dialogue.
Having the horse up actually had me tweak something in the script for when we revisit this, but I figured right after you, because originally in the script, and this is something if you're interested on how to, talk about the art between a writer and an artist, in the script it was actually my fault when I was like, this epic money shot, I think I called it, and I was thinking in my head when I wrote that, just a highly detailed image of, the horse on all fours and them slowly trotting forward. So then when James sent this image over, it was this horse and like a, you know what I mean? Like a hee-ah stance. I was like, oh, no, that's not going to work. And then it instantly hit and I said, oh, the horse smells the dead or something like that. I was like, okay, that's cool. So I didn't even say anything. I just said, oh my God, that fits. And then when we revisit this, I tweaked a part of the story because we'll see it at a different angle. Trust me, later you'll be like, oh yeah. So it actually gave birth to another great idea. But yeah, I love that. So another thing from a writing perspective, be clearer, because I think I could definitely be clearer when I'm doing the scripts. I think that's one thing I got to work on, and that'll help, especially when the artist is trying to figure out how you want things to go, So for those interested in tips and tricks, keep in mind, it's not always about what's right versus what's wrong compared to how the artist is doing it, compared to how the writer envisioned it when he wrote the script. It's usually, almost always, just a different perspective. Now, if it affects the story, then you can get into conversations about how the art is right and wrong based on how it affects the story. But usually, add some flexibility, keep the conversation open, and if you're a writer working with an artist, be very descriptive, but also let their style, breathe in the artwork itself. Moving on to page 3, we have the rider and the prisoner coming towards this old beat-up house that looks like it has a lot of history to it. And we also have a close-up of the house, a car, the prisoner falling down in the grass on his face. Is that a piece of what's on his shoe? Is that tape?
You said his shoes, in the early version of the script, I don't know if it's still in there, but you said that his shoes were coming apart, so he just like duct taped them. That was just something to help the motion. And I just like this page overall because before I officially did the comic, panel 2 was part of one page that I did to show you what it would look like as a comic, because I don't even think it was officially going to be a comic from what I knew, because I didn't know at the time that there was another artist involved. But I loved that panel where the prisoner's like stopped, because the rider stopped. He's looking at the car while the Guardian's speaking about the house. The prisoner's like catching his breath because obviously he's just being pulled along, and then the rider's going up closer, so the reader like follows the rider going up to the house. And I just thought it'd be funny, like again, he gives no fucks for this prisoner. Like, he just plods along. The prisoner's like trying to rest he can't see, so he don't know the rider's about to start moving or whatever. And then the last panel is just like a cool shot of him falling on his ass because he's stopped again. The rider stopped again, and obviously you can't see shit. And I just thought it'd be funny to have like the tape nearly coming off, but I didn't really do anything with the tape and the shoes being fucked up because I barely draw feet. There's only like one specific panel later on where you'll see his foot, and when I drew it, I put the tape on another foot instead of that one, which is his left foot. I did it on his right, and then I had to change it again. But these are things that I don't bore Ronnie with to say that I fucked up. And there is actually one serious thing that I only noticed like a year after. I think it was when I actually saw the comic in comic form. But there's a thing with the rope later on that just disappears, and no one's brought it up. I don't think I've mentioned it to you, and you've not brought it up to me, but I noticed it, and we'll get to that when we get to the page.
All right. Next, we have the rider scouting out the feeding post area and the woods behind it, which I love the way that binocular point of view came out. And then we have him hopping down off his horse and then giving a little love pat to the horse. And then that's where he notices there's a grave site. And he might have stopped because maybe this is something that's new for the rider. Maybe he's been here before. But hey, what the hell is that grave?
Exactly. What is it, Ronnie?
I don't know. Hey, did you do something different with the binocular point of view? It looks different than a regular. Did you run some kind of filter on that?
Yeah, it doesn't really show up in print, and it barely shows up in digital. Like, this whole issue is me finding my feet.
You lost your feet?
As an artist, and you finding your feet as a writer.
I know where my feet are. They're in my socks.
And then, hoping to God that we actually gel together where it tells a cohesive story. But this just comes from me being a photographer. I don't tend to over-process with effects, but I didn't realize being subtle in a comic will translate for when it gets printed, because the printed version, where there's like a blue tint to the inside of the glass, and that's just to show a separation between the glass and then the black silhouette, just to show you that he's not looking with his eyes. But again, when it prints, because that blue is so close to black, it just all looks black. And another tricky thing was the positioning of the handcuffs, which is a small thing, but it was like trying to figure out the whole landscape and then drawing, the same area but from different angles. Twice I've changed where that handcuff's supposed to be, but it now makes sense. Like, if someone wants to nitpick, and they'll see when we see the feeding post, like what direction the handcuffs are, the handcuff clampy bit where they're hanging from there shows up. But I don't think there was 3 zombies originally in this, but you told me to get rid of one because there was one that was like pretty much coming close to the thing. I don't remember the specific reason. I think it was just to show more mystery in the background, to show that there are creeps there.
Oh yeah, the reason was just a timing thing. Having the creep right at the edge of the woods wouldn't be enough time for the rider to get the prisoner down to the feeding post and then back up to the horse. That's it, just a small timing thing. Plus I love it having just the 2 shadows there. Yeah, but I do think that is subtle enough because when I didn't know I don't think we talked about an effect on that panel. And I noticed something. I was like, oh, I like that. I like how it looks, because it does look like he's looking through a glass and not the regular.
Yeah, I did play with having like a white highlight as well, but it just distracted me. Again, I was just finding my feet of what I wanted the page to look like. But yeah, it's a cool panel. Like, people were saying they've never seen anything like that before, and I'm just like, I've seen that quite a lot.
So next we have the prisoner on the ground, the rider coming up. I'm sure that was a pain in the ass drawing him from that angle.
I actually like that one. Like doing that one.
Oh, you had fun drawing that one?
Yeah.
For some reason, I always figured that angle would be a pain in the butt.
Well, it was the mask, but again, as an artist, you have tools. You can take a picture of yourself. So like if you struggle on an angle of what something's supposed to look like, because when you're learning the fundamentals of perspective, if you imagine like a triangle is what you'd use for a low angle, because if you fit a body inside the triangle, as it gets to the point, that shows that it's going away in the distance. But because the rider's arm is quite bulky, it didn't really have that effect. And it's the same thing for the Guardian. Because like if he was a slimmer character, like his hips would be wider than his shoulders just because it's a low angle and he's receding into the background. And then it was just remembering, not always do you have to draw the head at such an extreme up angle that all you would see is like underneath his nose or whatever, like he's looking at the prisoner. So that panel was a lot easier to do than the first page we see the rider. I also just like how the prisoner's like trying to get the bag off, because the bag's not really secured down. It's just the fact that we know what the rider's like if he tries to do something, which you'll see in another page. And then I just like the panel with the rider lifting him up by the shoulders That was inspired by an old James Bond image that I even sent you. It had I think his name's Lockjaw, like the big dude with the metal teeth. There's like a shot of him like picking up someone like that. So I was like, that was a little homage to that one. But I overall like this page, and no one really noticed when I do shadow figures on panel 5, where you see a bit of the house. There's a shadow there just to show later on that there might be something else going on in this area, just to make it a little bit creepy. Yeah,
I haven't seen a single comment about that. To be honest, I don't think we talked about that, but I was tempted to ask you to remove that.
I think it was in the script.
No, it's almost definitely in the script, because behind them is supposed to be shadows, but the reason is, for some reason, when I looked at that originally, I was like, does that look like a zombie? But then I don't know if you did this on purpose, but if you sync it up to the guy who runs around the building, he actually looks like he's got the hoodie on.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I had the conflict, like, wait a minute, is he too noticeable? But it doesn't matter, because no one noticed it, or at least no one mentioned it, you know?
Yeah, no one's picked it up, but it is in the script. It just says, this is where it would be awesome to add the shadow as if a person peeks from the back of the house. But because you couldn't see the back of the house...
Yeah, now I love it, though.
I had to put him at the front.
Yeah, now I absolutely love it. Just before, yeah, you get a little worried. It's like, okay, maybe that's a little too much. But I think because you have him right by the bushes there, that blends. Like, if you're focused on the rider, you don't even notice him. Again, those looking for tips, this is actually a really good point to bring up. The main reason why I was tempted to take out the shadow, which I love the shadows, and this is something I'm going to have to pay attention to, it just looked like it stood out too much, because when you're viewing this on the computer, you're viewing the high-def, high-resolution file that's, boom, right on your screen. And when I check the comic book printout, man, you can't even notice it. You can't even notice it. You know what I'm saying? So always keep that in the back of your mind, that when you're viewing these high-def files up close and personal, that image is going to be shrunk way down into comic book format. For a lot of the art and a lot of the dialogue, you're going to have to pay attention to the size and what it will look like when you shrink that down. That is very, very important. And I think I said that wrong. You're supposed to notice it if you take a moment to just examine the panel, the artwork. What I mean is, it's not supposed to catch your attention right away. Your focus is on the prisoner and the rider, and then maybe your eyes afterwards in second reading or third reading, or maybe in first reading. You take a glance at the panel overall, and then you're like, oh, shit, I see something, you know? So when I say you don't even notice it, I mean it shouldn't be this flaming pink, you know, explosion where as soon as you look at the panel, you see it right away, because that's not the actual purpose of what James did with the art. It is supposed to be subtle, and it's supposed to be something that you have to do a double take on and be like, oh shit, I didn't see that the first time, or right away.
You'll find, as like, for those who want or are writing their own story and they want to get an artist involved, you have to be clear to yourself and think why you want an artist to work on your project. It's not just to do your vision exactly. You want to get someone to add their own little tweaks to things so it makes it a bit more interesting, because not everything that you write is going to look great, if that makes sense. So the fact that he's still there, and I've fucking gone off a tangent.
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean, and I'll back that up.
It's because you said you were worried. Obviously, there's got to be trust built between the writer and the artist, and that only comes from working together for extended periods of times. Because you know now, like, as we're working together, like, you're a lot more looser.
Oh, yeah.
Because not every time it's going to work. And it's also, if you could draw yourself, then obviously you would do it exactly how you want. But as soon as you ask someone else to do something, they're never going to get it exactly as you see it in your mind. And sometimes you might get something back that's better, which happens a lot. And it's the same, like, the writing inspires me to make some changes later on. Because it's also, again, we're finding our feet for this. So where there's panels where there's some kind of continuity error, you know, that's on both of us because we haven't been clear enough with each other.
Yeah.
But it'll happen. Again, with the rope thing that comes in later on, like, it's not really a big deal. It doesn't change the story. But I just noticed it, and it was kind of like, this should be there, but it's not.
Yeah.
Which will make sense when we get to that page.
I love that panel, I'm not a monster.
Yeah, that was me trying to inject some Charlie Adler dramatic shadow into the face as well.
Yeah.
Because I love doing the heavy shadow stuff anyway, because that's what I'm attracted to. It's not just Charlie Adler who has this style. There's a lot of artists that I follow that all have this very black and white noir style to it. It's just ours is a little bit different because we've now got color as well. So sometimes I don't need to go in heavy with shadows, which one speeds up the process of drawing sometimes. But two, I also like when the scene or the tone of the page just switches and it's gone from less shadowy to like really heavily in shadow, just to give a sense that things are actually getting a bit more intense. Yeah, it fits with the word as well. I'm not a monster.
And then we got the prisoner finally exhausted, dragged up to the feeding post.
He keeps falling over.
Yeah, he's exhausted. Oh, believe me, he's exhausted. Next page, we got in a beautiful panel that I love. The rider gets him in position, and then he gets headbutt. He falls, and another awesome panel. He gets stomped against the feeding post. I was real excited when you sent that over.
Yeah, people keep picking out his the size of his shoe. I put that in there because that's just what my size is. I didn't know if it was going to show up in the actual printed version because obviously it prints a lot smaller. But there's people even Spin on the last video actually commented again on it, but she sent me a message online about it as well, saying she likes the little detail.
I've seen a comment or two about foot size, and I was like, "What are you people talking about?" I never even noticed that.
Yeah. Well, they say
at least I don't.
The bigger the feet, the bigger the,
Yeah, it was kind of something where it just like,
which is true.
Never came to my mind. Oh, is it?
Apparently.
This next panel, I do, and here's another thing between writers and artists, like Jim was saying before. I think James had it 100% before. It is as a writer, there's a lot of times where you'll feel like, you honestly will feel like, oh, nope, that's not exactly how it should be, and yada, yada, yada. And sometimes the artist will give you something, and you're like, oh my God, that's way better than I pictured. But as long as it doesn't hurt the story, the continuity of the story, because especially with this I feel is a trickier one than starting a simple story where everything doesn't mean something. Every detail in the background of issue 1 means something. The house, every bullet hole, every boarded window, the car, not every dent on the car, but a lot of the dents, the feeding post, the bones by the feeding post, there's a background story to all of this, and that's the point of it. So for issue 1, I think I was on way more edge with the details and specifically what happens compared to like issue 2 and 3, because, if you're on a street and you're only on this street once, who cares? James, draw it however the hell you want. You know what I mean? But when it comes to these, I think I was a little more strict or a little more worried. But I do love this page especially. I had this idea that I ran by James. I don't know what gave me the idea, but I envisioned this little back and forth with these triangular things. And I just talked to James about the idea. And the next thing you know, he was putting these sketches together. And this ended up being one of my all-time favorite pages. I love it. I love how it looks. I love the art. I love how it flows. I'm curious, was this page fun to draw or frustrating?
No, it was fun in the sense that this is what leading the viewer's eye is all about, pretty much. Like, we've got this whole zigzag motion, like it just flows from top to bottom. It's pretty seamless, in my opinion. It was frustrating in the fact that it's an unconventional panel, and you, like me, we just like having clean panels to show stuff in. I don't like how DC and Marvel do it, where they're amazing pages to look at, but they're very hard to follow what's going on because there's like panels all over the place over like a massive image.
Oh yeah,
like a borderless image or whatever. And it's just like, what is the most important thing to look at? Look at, again, like The Walking Dead or anything that Sean Phillips has done. Like, they're all clean panels. The tricky part here was fitting in what you want, but also at the same time worrying about when it gets to the smaller points in the panel, which is insane. But yeah, overall, I liked the whole layout of it, and it was a good idea. Like, it changed up how the panels looked before this point, and the rope thing comes into play here. I think it's because subconsciously I was still thinking about how I was still unsure before I drew the issue, like how the prisoner is secured to the feeding post. Obviously, we've settled on handcuffs being there. But originally, he was just going to be tied up by rope.
Yeah.
Which I think on that very first Facebook image I did for you, that was just rope around the post. I don't think I did handcuffs on there. So the prisoner's been like carried through rope this whole issue. And then we have a panel of him like securing the prisoner with the rope. And my mentality was just the fact that he might try and escape before he puts the handcuffs on. So the rope was just like an extra means of like securing and whatever. So then it goes to the close up where he's like pulling it tight and it goes, but then every panel on from there, the prisoner's no longer tied up with rope. The rope just disappears. Which has bugged me since I saw it, but I didn't see it until like much later. Because like that panel where he's walking away on the next page, boom, like the rope's gone. Now you could say, because this is a comic, it's not a film, and even films will do this, like you're not going to show everything in real time. So there's no saying that he didn't fold the rope back up and just like put it somewhere out of shot or put it under his jacket or whatever. Because on the horse as well, on the page where he's getting off the horse, it's very hard to see it, but on the saddle of the horse on the side that's opposite what you can see as a camera, there is an indication that there's like a big rolled up bag which could possibly have like a sleeping bag in it, and that's just where I envisioned where he'd put all of his stuff and where he'd get stuff like the rope, just a little duffel bag kind of thing that's attached to the horse. But yeah, I just don't know why I didn't carry on the rope thing like throughout. I think it made it because I don't know the story of like whether or not the prisoner stays on that post.
Yeah.
And being tied up and handcuffed, you know, that's kind of, you can't really say, oh, he managed to get out of both things.
No, he's not getting out.
I'm just saying, like, theoretically, with it being handcuffs, the feeding post is privy to the elements of the weather. So there's no saying that the clamp got rusted at some point and he could have, like, snapped free or whatever. But I think being tied up with a rope would make it even less believable if he did escape or whatever. But that's why I didn't have the rope on.
Oh, yeah, I'm actually eager to get to those pages now because I don't know how the hell I missed that either. But what about this peekaboo? The peekaboo creep? Because that wasn't in the script.
It's everyone's favorite line.
I know.
And I didn't deliberately do the zombies to be like peekaboo. It was just the fact that in the panel where you see the binoculars, like they're just flitting around, like they don't know people are there.
Yeah.
Because we know the creeps get a bit more active when they see there's something, otherwise they'll just like stick to like the shade or whatever. But the fact that he's like called him over and it's in the woods, like it would make sense that eventually a creep's gonna come from behind a tree or whatever. But yeah, I just like how that ended up with that line. That is my favorite line, and people I've showed it to, like, yeah, they've always laughed at it and said that's amazing.
I love that. And that's another thing for people interested. You'll find when you go back to do the lettering or if you rewrite dialogue, I always love polishing dialogue and polishing some of the words. That moment jumped out to me. I forget what he originally said, but it was basically like, that's it, come on, come and get it. Something simple and generic. And then as soon as I glanced on that, I was like, look at this peekaboo motherfucker. And then I said, that's it. That's it. Come on, you peekaboo motherfucker. I love that. But and that's when something gels great, you know, when you see something, when you're putting the comic together and two of the creative people are doing something different and then it connects together in a way neither one of them expected at first. It works out great. And I love how we got this tall shot of leg bone, which I talked about it in the writer one coming up. We're going to discuss in a second. There's I say it's a page missing, but it's not missing. It's just coming up in a different perspective when we revisit what happens. That's the reason why leg bone is, he has this tall panel where you can see head to toe and you can see his rotted ass leg. I love that.
I also added to it and have his arm like almost coming off as well. Like it's dislocated, but it's also because he's so rotted that the arm's eventually going to fall off, so that if we see it again, instead of just having like the leg thing be apparent, like I wanted a cool shot of just like the arm coming off, and it's like it would look funny like drawing it, but it wouldn't be funny if he was in that situation just seeing this like zombie like crawl towards it, but he's only got like one good arm and a fucked up leg. It was also, I wasn't sure like how it was going to fit because you were very specific after I drew this issue of what the creeps should look like and how they act. And the main thing was like the elbows tucked in, the hands out, because they're always like ready to grab. In here, it doesn't really sell that idea because I had done the arm like almost falling off. And I just thought it'd be funny, like if there's a shot later on where he's going to lunge towards the rider and obviously his arms are outstretched, but in the motion of the messed up arm, it would just like fall off in the motion. So I thought that'd be something cool visual later on in the line. But yeah, his priority for his leg.
And that goes back to if you're in a team of a writer and an artist, or if you're in a team of 3 or 4 and you got colorists or whoever, you got your whole neighborhood doing a comic, communication is absolutely important. That's one thing I failed on a couple times, especially with the creeps. The zombies in this universe, they're very different than, they're similar, yet at the same time very different than what we were used to. So I wish that's something that I, sat down in the very beginning, did this list, here's what they're like, but maybe you guys can learn from that.
There is something that does carry out visually if you look at our zombies compared to The Walking Dead or any other kind of zombie media, and it's the eyes. I never really got this, but when you would put something on Instagram, you would obviously put tags in it, and one of the tags was empty eyes, and I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? Does it mean, did you put that because of the creeps, like the main visual distinction is because their eyes like are all like the flesh is all rotten, so like they're becoming blind kind of thing?
Yeah, well, if anyone wants a specific visual, the original idea when I was putting the story together was the empty eyes is because it's an empty eye socket. And if anyone wants to know what that looks like, just look at old mummies. You ever see an old mummy image and they just have these slits in their eyes and the eyeballs gone? Well, the original idea is not all of them. It's not like, okay, the second day of being a zombie, their eyes, deteriorate and ooze out of their face, because some of them have these streaking marks. Eventually we'll get to some really gory looking zombies, but for a lot of them, their eyes will deteriorate. And I thought it would be so cool, since The Walking Dead, the zombies have these big white eyes.
Yeah.
We would have the absolute opposite of that, which is the deteriorated eyes. And we'd have some where it's just an empty cavity, hence the empty eyes.
Like, you do see that if you look at the back of the cover from issue 2 onwards, or even the second print of issue 1, where there's the rider among the creeps, because that was part of like a triple image, like a Last of Us fan art and The Walking Dead. They're all distinctively looking different. Like, So when you look at Doomsday Kingdom next to The Walking Dead, like all of our creeps have like their eyes are pretty much sunken in, and that's the main thing. Like, people didn't really mention this or like say that's cool or something, but it's something that makes the creeps, even if they act the same as every zombie ever at a certain point in their stages, like the eye thing still makes them look different. In that poster image, the memories image in issue 2, the zombies at the top, like a lot of them have like no eyeballs, and the ones that do are like, even in this issue, I coloured them more yellow to look like rotted flesh or to visualise deteriorating eyeballs, because white over time, when it gets dirty or whatever, it goes more yellowish. And then also, as a cool effect, because we don't do pupils for the zombies, in some close-up shots of the creeps, you'll see the blood vessels where there would be a pupil. All of the blood vessels round up and have like a little white gap in. If we get to a page in the comic and it's prevalent, and I'll mention it again, but that was just a thing as well to make it look different, because again, I don't want glowy white eyes the same as The Walking Dead.
I think this would be a great opportunity to break. We will definitely have another part coming up, possibly even 2 more parts. There's still 45 minutes of discussion that is recorded between me and James. I also want to say this is one of my favorite prints, and I do believe he still has some of these available. It's a 3-part print if you just want The Walking Dead, or you just want the Doomsday Kingdom part, or you just want the Last of Us part. I have all 3 hanging to the left of me right in the office, because these are my all-time 3 favorite zombie genre franchises. You have The Walking Dead, Doomsday Kingdom, I'm a little biased on that one, and then The Last of Us. You can find the links to all our stuff down in that video description. Huge thank you again for showing us some support. It's taken hours to get these edited together. So thank you very much. My numb ass appreciates it. Too much info? I'm sorry. Thank you very much, guys. And stay tuned for the next one coming in a day or 2.